All right. Hello, my name's Leon.
I'm Pablo.
We're here on The Boost today with a special episode with our friend Nick Honegger, the Director of Marketing and Sales at Geekdom.
What's going on, everybody?
Cool. Today we're going to talk about San Antonio Startup Week, Pitch It to Win It, and then just kind of general Geekdom stuff that's happening around.
Insights.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So Nick, do we want to start with Pitch It to Win It winners, or do we want to talk San Antonio Startup Week first?
Let's lead into it. Let's get folks excited about the week, and then we'll end with the winners, just so they can get a little excitement first. We'll build some drama.
Perfect. A little bit of drum roll. I'm sure there's somewhere on here that's a drum. It's been a week now. So last week it was everyone you could tell everyone went away. Yep. They were tired. They got a lot of information, and everybody was talking about it, from the Geeks and Drinks to the keynote speakers to each of the little parts. We did a live podcast. Pablo, you talked nearshore. So what was kind of the feeling after it, just from an organizer's perspective?
Yeah, I think we were super excited going into this because our big focus this year was all about invest in San Antonio, right? Mm-hmm. And the goal is to say, hey, you can find funding in San Antonio. There's a big roaring community here. So if you set up that as a theme and then go into an event and it feels empty, it would have been disaster. Right? You'd be like, oh man, that's the risk. So the fact that we spent the entire week breaking registration records, attendance records, engagement records, and then we had the biggest party we've ever had for a startup week, it just really, I think, got across to the entire community and the staff that San Antonio can be and is a serious player in the startup and small business world. And I think this is our week to really celebrate that. So it was a very good, we made it, we're alive, and we cannot wait for, to do it again next year.
Well, it was an amazing event. From going to San Antonio Startup Week pre-COVID to this one, it felt like a very big conference. There was locations here at Geekdom. There was Launch SA, which was a spot. You also had the new Intercontinental Hotel as a spot. So there was a lot of spread to it, but there was always folks walking from Launch SA to Geekdom to the hotel. It really felt like there was a lot. And then the themes of the day, I thought that was a really cool kind of organizing method, because the types of folks that turned out for Latin American one, the Invest in Latinx, it was fascinating. You saw a lot of immigration lawyers. You saw a lot of folks that were doing stuff in Latin America. And then you also had the tech companies that came. It was a cool mixture each day that essentially people that self-aligned with those ideals and those message would come out and show up to the events. They would mingle, and then they had an easy conversation starter. Whereas, not a knock at the other years, but the other years, you had a lot more, and it felt very big conference. This year, it kind of felt like micro each day in programming and the differences, so that people could have a conversation that was just focused on the investing community or invest in Latinx.
Yeah, and I appreciate that feedback, because I think the big thing for us this year was really about being intentional. So it's hey, if we want to show across this theme of kind of invest in, are there micro topics each day that we can dive into? Because at the end of the day, for a lot of our community members, being an entrepreneur is hard. Having a startup company is hard, right? It's already spooky. You really want a community. So if there's a broad stroke event, it's not to say that it's bad, but it's okay, that's useful. I still want to go. Mm-hmm. But when you can say, hey, what if you're a startup who's moving to San Antonio from Mexico? Where is that community? Great, we have that. Right? What if you're you can niche down a little bit? And I think that's the joy of conferences, is that you think you're on this island and no one else has this crazy concept. It's actually, there's a whole topic on that. Why don't you come to this panel and then meet those peers? Because that's the community we want to spark, right? And the way you get to those discussions is you have those deeper days, if you will. Right. So I love to hear that, because I think we really tried to have that come across this year. So
So it was 5 days. Well, just for everybody, Monday, and I'm blanking on them.
Sure,
we'll have to pull it out.
We'll have to cheat. But I want to say it was. I think I'm going to get Monday wrong, but I want to say it was general diversity, Latinx, women, innovation in tech, and then San Antonio. And I'm pretty close on most of those.
Good job.
But we'll see.
I get it. We're a week away, and also you had so many like events, so many little parts of social media. So there was a lot going on. My real favorite day in the end came down to the Invest in San Antonio and then the Latinx. Those 2 days, the Latinx just. We're in San Antonio, and it's large Hispanic population, but a lot of times I don't really sense that 100%. Like everyone's kind of Hispanic in some capacity, but we don't talk about it. The Chamber of Commerce, the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, is the largest in the country for that. But seeing all the folks that were coming here, and like I just moved my company from Mexico. We've got an arm in Brazil. We've got an arm in Costa Rica. It was so cool to see that and have that kind of there, and that's what stuck out to me. Is just like, wow, there's a lot of investment from other countries that are coming here.
And I think one thing that was super cool about that, like talking about community partners, the reason we had such a strong presence that day is we leveraged this group called Inicio Ventures, and Puro Pitch was a part of that. They're like, hey, we invest in Latinx companies, like you guys seem awesome, throw a huge competition with some of the other folks over there at Startup Week so we can invest $35K into a Latinx business. And I'm like, that's awesome. Like there are just groups out there that are like, hey, we care about this, you seem to be doing this. So already for next year, we're looking for more folks that are just investing in specific communities, because we can be that venue. I think that's where like Startup Week is interesting. Geekdom can be very interesting, because if folks have that capital, we would love to deploy it in San Antonio. And I think that was the perfect example of, if we build it, they will come. Because all of those days were just packed.
And they gave away, I believe, 30 or 35,000 that day.
Yes, I want to say it was in that realm. And the coolest part about that one too is we specifically tier out those prizes. So it's not one team that took all of it, but it's a couple of teams took kind of a chunk out of that pool. So that way they all have next steps, they can all grow, and they're all kind of plugged into that capital community.
Yeah, and I think the part that I don't think any of us has touched on is just how much money was given through the whole week. Monday started off with the pre-accelerator pitch. That was $20,000. That went to how do you say their name? Grant Apply. Grant Apply, and they always spell it a little weird. It's a company. They always got to spell it just slightly different. It's good. The Women's Founder Network, I believe it was, gave away additional money.
Yeah, 30,000. That was Waste Away.
Waste Away, and then the Latin one. Yep. Do you know who won that one?
I do, but I don't know the name of that company.
Okay, we'll put it in.
We'll put it in, but I think over the week it was almost, I think all partners and stuff included, like almost $200K just in that week. If not more, that might be too low, but it's one of those. It's enough of a number to be like, in 1 week in San Antonio, like there are opportunities.
And that was just like sanctioned events.
Yeah, that's just spur of the moment. That doesn't include any of the like. There was some like Alamo Angels had some events.
I heard that a lot of money got deployed there. And Alamo Angels deploys a lot of money, but in the sense of one event, 1 day, 1 week, like that was a big amount. So I think it kind of highlights, to your point, just that San Antonio is not a market that is hard to raise money. There's some challenges and there's some things to overcome, but the San Antonio market that is like starting a business has so much support, so much capital in various different ways.
No, I super agree, and I think that was the goal of the conference too, is just kind of lifting that veil of, hey, you can launch in San Antonio. It's not always Austin or Dallas or Houston, and I think the coolest part about that is, for us, when you raise in San Antonio, sometimes it's, I just don't know where to go. So if we could show you the community, like, yes, it might be a little bit harder to walk in and know exactly who to get capital from, but we have a way like bigger community in San Antonio to make sure you get plugged into where that capital lives. Plus, we're way cheaper to live in, right? So that capital is going to go farther, right? Just to plug San Antonio a little bit. But,
sure, absolutely.
I think it all goes in tandem.
Well, one thing that I was going to say is just from my own experience of having done the nearshoring event. I mean, I've been working in that space for so long, but yet I didn't really know who the players for that space in town even were. Who's interested in it? Who likes to talk about that? So when you're talking about investing in community, you also gave the forum to help communities connect, right? I mean, a community sometimes could be an interest. It could be a topic matter. It could be technology. It could be whatever it is, right? You can form a community around anything. But the fact that you have these different days to attract, you know, I guess just different walks of professional life, I guess. You know, getting everyone together, and it really, I mean, it was a great event because I got to meet so many people just from just being in a room to talk about something that was of interest, at least to me, funding aside.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, if that was one of the goals, that was, I would say, a big success.
Yeah, well, A, I appreciate that. B, it definitely is. I think the goal, especially with San Antonio, is just you have to build the bridges. You have to, with anything, be it in the startup world or small business community, you are just so on an island sometimes. So it's like, who are my lifelines? Like, who else is in this with me, just to lean on, to learn from resources? You know, I've made plenty of mistakes in my career, but I've probably avoided 10 times as many just by asking folks around Geekdom or like this community, like, hey, is this a good idea? And they're like, oh God, no, like this is horrendous for me. Like, don't do that, do it this way.
Yeah.
And I think those discussions are critical, and why these events are so successful, because people want those conversations, because everybody wins at the end of the day through that.
Yeah. Those conversations, and this is not an ad for Geekdom in any way, but the mentor network, you've got so many brilliant folks that you can turn to and say, hey, I have a very niche problem, you know, like in you know, fundraising and like company organization. Like I'm helping on some crypto stuff, and finding somebody that's done financial law with crypto, very hard thing to like just go and Google that. But asking through the network, it was like everybody was like, hey, there's this one lawyer that does that. They're out of like Bernie, you know, a little far, but here's the person. Like 5 people were like, that's the person. And then you come and you tell them, hey, I talked to these people. They're so helpful. Like there's never a hesitation within the San Antonio network to say, hey, this is my cost structure. This is what I can do for you to be helpful. And then after that, there's obviously fees and everyone has to live, but there's always so many people to say, hey, I want to just be helpful. And you know, hey, is it a conversation? Is it some guidance? Here's, you know, some really interesting stuff. Like I've done it with sales tax. Like I've called people up and been like, hey, this is the very niche thing. All of it's gray area, and San Antonio has that, and part of that is that Geekdom network where you can go turn and ask, and somebody points it to whoever it is. You know, like it's just like the nearshoring. A lot of people are now pointing to Pablo to say, hey, he's got some real expertise in nearshoring. And now, you know, like he was able to share that. It was like, oh, hey, I didn't realize that resource was down the hall for me, or oh, he lives in the same neighborhood as me. There was a lot of those, like
very San Antonio, yeah.
Yes,
exactly.
and it's a massive city. Like I think that's the part that really gets missed in the conversation. You know, you go to New York and you can get lost in New York very easily. You know, where's the tech scene? Where's the startup scene? Where's the business building scene? There's probably millions of resources, but there's also probably, you know, spread out through there. San Antonio, I feel like everybody kind of comes into these areas. They go to Launch SA, they go to Geekdom, they go to UTSA and then SBDC. And it feels easier to find those resources. You know, you have Zach from Nonprofits moves from Phoenix to here because through all the research, it was always San Antonio seems to have a lot of stuff. Like maybe the marketing of it is like a little bit more tech focused initially, but a lot of it's now like, hey, there's also these resources here for, you know, CPG or even a service-based business at Launch SA. So it's grown exponentially from those original roots.
And I love that you say that too, because I think what separates us as well, kind of for San Antonio, again, I'll plug the city, I love it here, is that even our bigger players participate in, I would say, smaller events, right? San Antonio Startup Week, big, but you know, it's granted caps out around like 2,500 people. So we're growing it, and it's growing every year, but it's not like a 1 million+ person event. But even for an event of that size, we get big industry players like HEB to come in and say, hey, if you want to sell it at our stores, here's the CPG talk. They have their own track. So it's I think that it's that investment from the community of saying, hey, even though we're, you know, one of the biggest grocery retailers on the planet, we're going to send, you know, come talk to our team who's like, these are the people that are going to buy your product. Here's how you get on the shelves. Like if you're a CPG company, like that's the player you go meet with.
And I think it's cultural to San Antonio. You know, I talk to folks about that, and they're astonished because they're used to a Kroger or Safeway, all one of the same company in some capacity, being like, oh, hey, here's a slotting fee, here's this.
Yeah, here, get in line, and we'll talk to you eventually. Go through our lawyers. We're like, no,
Exactly.
they just send their team like, oh yeah, come on, let's chat. Like, who cares? I think it's that willingness to have an intro conversation, and kind of like what you were alluding to earlier. It's not like it's magically free after you've met with them for 12 meetings, but it's one of those that everyone is so willing to be helpful. And then that sets you up to where, hey, if I've helped you enough where you're going to be successful, to the point where you're so successful you actually need to hire an attorney or hire a marketing team full-time, awesome. But I'm an option. And if not, that's okay. And I think that, to some folks, is just so foreign. But for here, it's just so normalized. Which is great, because then it's you help everybody grow. And then, hey, I'm winning, so I'm going to reward you back because now I can hire you. Awesome.
It's a win-win mentality.
Yeah.
And very few places do I sense that all the time, because it is a dog-eat-dog world out there. It is hard, but I feel like there's a community here that's rooted in that Geekdom has fostered, that Launch SA is fostering, that Tech Block is fostering. There's so many of these organizations that continuously build and help and push along a really great narrative that I think everybody in the community kind of adapts to and says, okay, we're gonna be helpful in every single way.
So, as an organizer, what are some of the trends that you noticed this year versus maybe previous years?
Yeah, so I'll take that kind of two ways. One is what we saw kind of during the event, and one is what we saw before and kind of influence our planning. And I think from a planning standpoint, one of the biggest things we saw was, granted the theme of the event was, hey, we would go to San Antonio, but like you can't raise money. San Antonio doesn't work. Ever since Rackspace went away, so it's the city's dead. I was like, oh my god, like all this doom and gloom. And then you're like, well, like really, if you dive into that a little more, like you find out like none of that's really true. Like yes, it's capital got more expensive for the world after COVID. Like there's like all these trends around like how do you like raise money, and yes, it's a little tighter, and you kind of see trends in the valley of like especially like tech getting choked out. But that's not necessarily the trends here. It's just harder to find stuff. So we said, hey, how do we as organizers and advocates for the city kind of really start changing that trend? So we kind of took it upon ourselves and we're just going to do a whole bunch of like pitch competitions, money given away, and then also try and theme that per kind of category to say, to even at the categorical level, there is like, hey, depending on who you are and where you're at, there are resources for you, and really just show like there is stuff in San Antonio. Like if in a perfect world, people would see that conference and tell their friends like, man, you have to move to San Antonio. Like there is stuff happening here. Like some of my favorite wins coming out of that week were we had folks from Houston and Dallas and Austin be like, oh man, like this was awesome. Like I didn't think San Antonio had anything like this. And I was like, great. Like if we could just change the view of San Antonio, like, because it's just true. Like we have such a powerful community with how that works. So pre-planning, it was all about that, like really like reshaping the narrative for the city, because I think that's how we're going to grow San Antonio in the next like 3 to 5 years. There's a bunch coming downtown. Like we need to be kind of forefront of changing that mindset. During the event, I think a lot of what we saw was A, kind of reinforcing that need for investment, but B, that desire for community, where it's folks where, well, I don't want to get them in trouble. But we had folks saying like, oh, I called out sick these days to come to this event, or like, oh, I had to do all this stuff because I wanted to be here. Like these conversations are so powerful, and I think it's people kind of remembering like, oh man, like you can learn so much face to face and meeting people and not being able to ask questions, and just driving those community driven stories, and just being willing to like put yourself out there. I think you saw that even with Pitch It to Win It. One of our contestants found us through Instagram, like ran to us on the last day, and was like, oh my god, like I've been seeing this everywhere, this is so cool, like I can't believe this is in my city, that I can just go meet these people. So I think one of the challenges for next year, kind of out of what we learned from that, is the trend of what we saw was, people want these resources, how do we get in front of them?
Sure.
Because one of the biggest things you get with community building, right, is like for every step you take forward, you have to, there's skeptics, there's people that are like, well, it's not really like that, or hey, it isn't like this, or hey, this isn't perfect. And to everybody's credit, like they're probably right in some way, right? It's not like we waved a magic wand and everything's amazing. But the goal is like, hey, we really do have this community. We really do have these resources. Like we want you to come take advantage of them.
Right.
Like how do we help you? And I think that was probably the biggest trend throughout the week, is this kind of like, oh wow, you do this. Like, this is here. Like, oh, like CPG's here too, or this is here too, or you're not just tech. It's like, no, like San Antonio can grow all these things, but we have to do it together. So I think that's going to, as we come to our like 10th year anniversary, which is next year, I think you'll see a big lean in from us on like really activating communities and showing people like, hey, this is here. Hey, here are the heroes you have to go plug into. Because we saw a big need of that at the conference. So it's okay, how do we take that momentum and keep it permanent? I think is what we want to lean into.
Well, I think you accomplished that and then some. A term that I heard thrown around a lot in many discussions. I heard it come out of many, many different participants' mouths, and even in conversation, panels, and just in general, having a drink and just talking about it. The term Valley of Death. Explain that, please.
Yes. So this is, if I had a bajillion dollars, this is where I would put it right now. So San Antonio has an interesting problem, at least that we think at the Geekdom side, is there are a lot of funding opportunities for companies here from ideation to what I would say is maybe like your seed. So from, hey, I'm starting out, maybe I got a micro grant, maybe I got a free office, maybe I raised my first like $10,000 to $50,000 to actually start my venture, right? I'm kind of going on this journey. And then we have some really good resources in the community that will get you through kind of a couple steps down, right? Where it's like, hey, I need to go raise like $1 million. I'll partner with Capital Factory. I'll do like a big Series A through like an Apple Angels. But even then, it's mostly angel funding. We have this weird, mystery gap, or the Valley of Death, which is for those folks who are like, hey, like I probably need to raise like $250K to $500,000. Where I've done a seed round, I've got some angel money, maybe I've raised up to like 50 to 100K, which again, super important, like a very good skill set. That's probably where we as Geekdom is our sweet spot, as we get you ready to get that first kind of 6-figure investment. But that's enough to get going. And you are way farther away operationally from being able to go raise like 7 to 8 figures. So what do you do in between? And right now, I think that's where we struggle, if anywhere, as a city, is having that in between. We don't have a lot of folks, broadly speaking, that write those like $250,000 kind of checks. Like, yes, there's certainly funds. Yes, we have some great like funding opportunities, but that's probably the hardest way to raise capital right now. And that's kind of the Valley of Death. Is like, how do we get you from you started? There's a big jump before your next big raise. Like, who's filling that kind of that in between investment, if you will, of like your first maybe round A.
No, you're absolutely right about it. And one of the things that I've seen just from being a mentor here at Geekdom, and I think Leon would concur, you're a mentor too, right?
Yeah.
So, all of us are mentors, is that operationally the startup is many times really heavy into the ideation. But beyond that, operationally, how do they structure? How do they market? How do they position themselves? What's their pitch? How do they brand? They're just basic things that, any established company effectively has. But I think sometimes a startup is slow to get to that point, So even from a funding perspective, you might be able to get you might win a competition, you might make some, you get some initial inroads. Now what do you do? Because it's not just simply, and I hate to say this, I'm sure people are going to grit their teeth when I say this, but it's not simply just funding your lifestyle. You are building a company. You're not just buying groceries. You know what I mean? So there is an investment that has to happen. And I think Geekdom also does a very, very good job of preparing, members for that transition. But would you say that maybe part of the conversation is also getting people to take that action, to say, look, we've got all of these programs, take advantage of them. Yeah. Because, I notice that you have a lot of events, and sometimes like some people will show up to some events, when they all can benefit, but you don't see the same faces at the same events.
No, I super agree. I think one of the hardest parts, I think, just as a founder, right, is you got a lot of stuff going on, and you have to kind of make those decisions of, how much time do I have to put in my company versus, do I have to still work my 9 to 5? Like, what is my cost for that? Do I have kids that, there's things in your life, regardless of where you're at, that will impact like what you can do as a founder. So I think the most important thing you can do is sit back and say, okay, like, what is a realistic number that I need to truly bootstrap this company? And if I could, build P&Ls. I'm such a financial nerd. I feel like I'm going to go on a ramble here, but it's like you should know, regardless of where you're at. Like, after come do a startup bootcamp. It's free. Yeah. Get your idea, figure out your MVP, and then as you're going through, like, the accelerator. Go through our programs. This is taught there, but you should know if you're going to go raise money or ask for capital, like your ops costs, like know like your true like margins, like why does that matter, like what does scaling look like? Because then what that will do is when you go have those larger conversations, especially like I'll take CPG for an example. HEB did a wonderful talk, and they're like, you'd be surprised at how many people come pitch to us wanting to be in the store, and they don't know what it would cost to even scale up to meet our demand. And I'm like, that's the one thing you would need to know. And like, what else would you go to them and say if it's not like, oh, here's how I go from X to Y? So I think it's hey, if you're gonna take advantage of the programming, like make sure you have your like business basics covered first.
Right.
So as you grow, you can take advantage of like, okay, if this is my MVP, then it costs this and I make Y. Great, go try and get 100 customers. What happens? Tell that story. Because if that goes great, that's the narrative you can use to go raise capital.
Right.
But if you just try and skip those steps, you're like, it's impossible to get money here. It's like, well, you got to try. Like, you got to do some of the hard stuff first before you can go raise money. And I think kind of like what you were saying, if people try and skip that, you end up missing some pretty critical things you need along the way, which is why these events are so important.
Sure.
Which is why, like, be it our programming or whatever programming you're using, like, know how your business works before you're like, I need $200,000. Because if you go ask for $200,000 and you break it down like, I'll put like 50 grand in marketing and like 100K here and like I'll hire someone. It's like, no, you won't. Like, that's not. Like,
it disappears very quickly.
yeah, like, and like, how long will it last you? Like, what's your runway? Like, where does it go? Like, it's not just because you were making 6 figures at your job and you want to like pay yourself that. Like, you want, like, no one will give you that capital. So I think it's having those kind of candid conversations with other mentors and peers of like, what is your true cost to run your business? And then solve that and then say, okay, like, what would my runway be? If I get sweat equity partners, like, what could they contribute? What do our hours look like? And it's going to be a grind in the beginning, and that's okay. It's not forever. But the only way you know that and can map that out is like financial modeling. That is my, and I will die on that sword of like financial predictions are so important to like be savvy with, like, know what your business is doing.
And I love that because those conversations are often not had initially. You get an idea, you do all that stuff, you put the brand together, you do all those.
If you build it, they will come.
Yeah, they get so excited about the brand. Yes.
And then figuring out those parts. So now, money perspective. We're talking pitch it to win it. It was $1,000 a day. We want to talk a little bit about that.
Yep.
We want to announce the winners.
Yeah.
It's like a drum roll.
Yeah. So for full context, if folks listening have zero idea what pitch it to win it was, I'll give you the elevator pitch, if you will, and then I'll announce the winners. To kind of double down on our commitment of investing in San Antonio, we said we're going to give away $1,000 per day of the week for the best elevator pitch. And the way we decided that is essentially you got the top likes, the top views, or the top shares of the day. That kicked you to the finals, and then a panel of judges picked a winner from each day. So I'm going to go day, and then I'm going to say the winner of each day, and then we're going to reach out to y'all on social at some point after this goes live. But for Monday, we had Marco. For Tuesday, we had AP or Ashley, which was by AP here at Geekdom. Wednesday, we had David. Thursday, we had Tasky, which was a student win. That was just super cool. And Friday, we had Move Club SA. So we're going to reach out to y'all. If you ping us on this podcast link, we'll ping you that way too. But all of you are getting $1,000.
Man, congratulations.
So congrats. Thank you so much for coming out and helping us smash a lot of social records. But could not be more excited for that kind of competition. And that will be back next year. We had a radically good positive response to that. But congrats again, y'all. Super excited.
That was really great. And everyone's pitch, like when I was watching, I think I watched almost every single one, at least 3 times. Like, they were, a lot of them were really well practiced. There were some tight days where you looked at them and you were like, okay, everybody's got a really great idea or they've got a really great business. And a lot of these folks, like you were saying, some of them came to actually just pitch it. They saw a post on Instagram. I heard a few folks ask around because they saw a KSAT article or KSAT coverage. They were excited at, hey, I can actually see if this is a great idea. It was almost an amazing way to validate.
Proof of concept.
Validate everything. There was one that and part of this is we interviewed them on the podcast. We get to kind of talk to them. One of them was a concept idea of like a mindfulness app. And it was interesting to see what was the actual trigger for this. It's like, I had a kid and then hey, I want to be present, and I'm struggling to balance work and this. And a lot of those really great ideas from businesses come from a personal pain
Right.
or a personal experience. Like part of the pre-accelerator was the cookie company, the Grammy's
Yes,
cookies.
Grammy's crackers. Yeah.
Grammy's crackers. Like the fact that they were like, hey, we can't find a cracker for our grandson, and we're gonna explore something. It's not too sweet, but it's also nutritious in some ways. And that was like a personal pain that scaled up. They went and tested it. A lot of those are really cool stories. And I think somebody actually getting that validation, and it's such a low stakes in terms of standing in front of a camera and just kind of
dealing with me for 2 minutes. Yeah.
it was a cool thing to see and watch, and kind of see those excitements, and the people talk about it through Startup Week. Like, people are actually looking for you. They're like, have you seen Nick?
I will say I'm super glad we did it. I'm very excited to keep it going. I think one of the things that surprised us, because when we mocked this up, we're like, this will either be interesting or we'll talk to no one throughout the week. And we ended up having to cut every day. We capped every day at like 10 or 12 people because there was too many pitches, right? It was like the best problem to have, because we're like, I don't know.
Your throat was getting sore.
Yeah, right. It was just like, and I was like, oh my God, like, which is great, because I just think it shows that there are so many folks in San Antonio that, given the opportunity, they would try something. Right?
Yeah.
It's like go, if you can learn anything from the pitch to winning competition, it's just try it. Like, come to a boot camp, come do free programming, like go to Launch SA, we have to go to the Tech Block pitch events too, those are coming up in November, just to learn and say, hey, like, I can do this. And I think if these events can do anything, it's just showing folks that it's not impossible. You don't have to have some crazy background, you don't have to come from this like crazy like wealthy family that like seeds your initial venture, like you just have to have this desire to have this, you've had this personal pain point that's not getting solved, like tell a story about it. And that is step one to like getting a good traction for your idea.
One thing I was going to say, and it's an idea that I have, but I think you should be a game show host because you did a really good job on those.
I'm ready. Yeah.
It should be next year game show themed.
I'm ready. Price is Right. If you're watching, I mean, I'm ready to
Perfect.
go.
I want a wheel. Somebody could be Vanna White.
There we go. I'll be like, spay and neuter your pets. I'm ready to go.
No. It was really great. I'm actually excited. After this, I'd love to go do follow-ups with these folks. Like, I want to see where these go. And every single one that I was able to talk to, I always told them, there's a 3-day boot camp. Like, hit that up. You're going to go do lean canvas. You're going to get a pitch deck going. I think that was kind of like a very easy next step. It's free. It doesn't require the Geekdom membership. It's kind of a great way to market and advertise for Geekdom in that funnel way. But the fact that it's free, just go there, get to talk to people, and then get to talk to the mentors. Like, there's so many folks that I think did that, and hopefully I see them there. I love to mentor on those weekend ones, Saturday and Sundays, that I hope that I keep seeing them, because these ideas are just like, small businesses are the backbone of America. They're the reason why this country is very prosperous in so many ways. So seeing that is just really exciting. I'm glad that they could get the $1,000. Now I'm hoping that they utilize it and start.
Well, Grant Apply was one of those people.
Yes. Did they?
Yeah, they came through the boot camp.
Yes.
Came through the boot camp, 120K through the pitch competition. I think they're going to the next accelerator too. I think more of the story is there's a lot of cool things you can do if you just keep working on your idea. Where it's go take advantage of the free resources. Those get you plugged into funding resources. Those get you plugged into mentors. And then most of our mentors know or have access to angel networks, which will get you even more money. So I think it's just like the whole theme of the conference. Like, hey, how do you start stuff in San Antonio? Go to where your community is, because they will have places to point you, people to introduce you to, and that's how you scale, right? You're going to scale way 10x faster through other people than trying to do it yourself. It does not make sense.
Agreed, 100%.
Well, I'm really glad we could sponsor San Antonio Startup Week, help collaborate on this, and looking forward to maybe next year on that. But congrats to everybody that won, and then Nick, thank you so much for helping organize this, keeping us on track, and just doing those pitch it to win it's every day.
No, but super huge thanks to y'all again. I think this is a cool combination of how do we grow San Antonio? And it truly is, one entrepreneur at a time. And the way you kind of fuel that spirit is you just get out there. You pitch it to win it, if you will. Don't be afraid to share your story. And I think that's why this is cool to do.
Yeah, and that's the premise of the show.
Right. Yes.
We started it, and hey, a lot of people were asking us for infomercial type things, and we're like, we'll get you in front of a mic, we'll get you in front of a camera.
Say your spiel. Yeah.
Tell us everything. We'll give you clips, and that kind of started down the podcast route for us, and now we want to help these folks kind of get some push in there. And we've heard people actually, realtors come to tell us that have been on the show, hey, somebody watched our episode and they bought a house for me in
outside of markets.
Yeah, they were from like Delaware.
That's wild.
There, so it's really cool to see that. And I know like some of the companies that we've done it with, they go and use those clips and then they put them on about pages. They do a lot of cool stuff with them, and it's really fun to help them along. So it's
in the spirit of what you've already shared.
No, yes. I'll take this moment to plug for the Boost. They've plugged Geekdom a whole bunch of times. These guys are great. If you get invited to the show, come be on the show. You'll learn a lot. You'll have good conversations. I think this is just another really cool example of two awesome folks in the Geekdom community that have created a way to have another win-win situation where we share the stories of our founders or folks in this community and help them win by getting a bigger audience. But it also is just, you learn a lot from just listening, and those stories matter a ton. So thank y'all for sharing those and making that happen.
Yeah, we won't cry. Well, thank you so much, Nick. If you're watching, if you're listening, subscribe to The Boost. You can go on theboost.fm, and then you can check out Geekdom at geekdom.com too.
See you next time.
Bye.